Hi, good evening. It's the caller. You're watching the Cheese Room podcast with me live from the surroundings of the Man Cave. And I'm joined by three distinguished guests this evening. So distinguished, in fact, I'm going to have to introduce them and ask them what their favourite supermarket is. Cameron, let's lead off with you. Firstly, I hope you're feeling better. I know you've been a bit poorly over the last couple of weeks. I can see you've got your hat. No, that's standard. Always got the hat.
Yeah.
How are you, my friend?
Yeah, doing well. A bit better. I've been getting over a chest infection and an asthma attack. So, been watching Tottenham from afar, enjoying what I've been watching. And my favourite supermarket you mentioned would be COYS down here, which is a bit like, Tesco up there, I think.
Yeah, well, it's run by ex-Tesco, so it probably is. Anyway, Jack, how are you, Mr. Flatcap? And what's your favourite supermarket in Brooklyn?
Sideways rain today in Brooklyn. My favorite, I don't know. I can't even say what my favorite is because you have to go to so many different ones to sort of, make the best of your budget. So I'm going to say none. There aren't really many that I really hold dear in my heart. But when I used to live in Texas, there was a brand called HEB, which is like kind of only sort of in Texas. And I think it might be in a few other states sort of close by, but they are from the Lord himself. They are the greatest ever, I would say, national. I would say the greatest ever. They're like Walmart, but, but then also like a Whole Foods at the same time. It's amazing.
What's so great about them?
It's like it makes you feel like an American, or it makes you feel like a true Yank when you walk in, where it's just enormous,
like massive
400-foot ceilings, 400 different types of Oreos and candy that you could imagine, from tortilla chips all the way to paint thinner, all in the same store. But at the same time, it's like really high quality and then also really low quality. It has everything at once. I've never walked into a store and felt like, I would never need to go any other store. That's the store where, makes you feel like a real American.
There's something for everybody.
It's beautiful. I took a picture of the meat aisle. The meat aisle was like 200 yards long. It was gorgeous.
Nice.
We definitely need to clip this. I mean, for Jack, like HEB, it makes you feel American, has to be the best slogan any supermarket in America would ask for.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
even for Pride Month, their bag said "y'all" means all, which I just think is like, like I said, they're really just they're very American. They're they make you feel they make you feel proud to be a Yank for sure.
There you go. Let us know your favorite supermarket in the chat. Y'all okay? HG, all right in there?
Yeah, I'm all right. Like, a favorite supermarket is one that doesn't cost much. Surely, that's typical HG.
Yeah.
I don't know, if I'm honest. Weirdly enough, I know growing up in the UK, Spar was considered like the happy shopper kind of supermarket, and yet over here, that's probably where we would shop if we could. If there was one close to us, we would go to Spar, as they say here.
Spar.
But Spar. But otherwise, I don't know. Cheapest chips. Aldi is not called Aldi here either. But do we want to talk supermarkets? But yeah, probably that would be my favorite. Yeah, Albert Heijn in Holland was pretty good when I lived there. Yeah, I did like Albert Heijn.
Albert Heijn. Okay, well, good. Glad to have you all with me tonight, and glad to have you all there in the chat. Do hit that like button, smash the subscribe, and share the show. There's plenty of people who could retweet us on Twitter, so go on, give us a mention. Let us know where you're from. Let us know where your favourite supermarket is. Take part in the show. We want to make this as interactive as possible tonight. I want to talk to you all about how you're feeling after that fantastic 2-0 victory against United at the Lane. Cameron, from afar, first of all, let's come to you and ask you how you're feeling about Spurs right now.
Very positive. I didn't watch it live. I was sick, but I watched the replay and it was thoroughly enjoyable to watch. I think the first half, as we can all agree, there were some heart palpitations there. But I'm loving what the team is buying into Ange now. It's actually quite interesting and fun to watch the buy-in from the group. And look, let's be honest, a lot of these players were there in the Conte regime. Your Dodgies, although he's come this season, your Porros. There was a beauty in the parts that Ange has actually sung together and started to build some form of system out. And it's actually enjoyable to watch. And to be honest, this week, the local press has been on the back of all the celebrations at Spurs, that of all the fans cheering in the stadium and outside of the stadium. That it's been really good to watch. But these are still early days at the moment. So, yes, very positive.
Yeah, good. HG, are you similarly enthused? I mean, it takes a lot to enthuse you usually. Something really hot in the, something really nice in the reduced section normally gets you going. Is this, are you feeling as enthused about Ange's Spurs as you are shopping cheap produce?
It's funny that even today, I'm going to ignore that. Even today, Christian Romero came out and said that in the 2 or 3 months that Ange has been in charge, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. 8 weeks. It is 8 weeks today that he took over, Friday, July the 1st. So it's incredible, genuinely incredible that, I mean, granted, I understand that no matter which situation you're in, you are always compared to the person before you, right? You always are, right? And so whether it's the guy who had my job before me or do you know what I mean? There's always something like that. And in this case, Ange is compared to Conte. No one really thinks about the last 8 games of last season with Stellini and Mason. And do I need to go on? We all think about Antonio Conte being the last manager of Spurs, and Ange Postecoglou is the complete opposite of that. And clearly, the fans love it, the players love it. So how could you not be positive about what's going on? Sure, you can find some negative things, but seriously, we're looking forward to watching Spurs play. Like next week, we get to see it 3 times. And like bearing in mind that having to wait 6 days has felt an eternity, I'm super excited.
6 times, Jack. Is the excitement palpable in Brooklyn?
I was wearing my Spurs kit often on my sort of morning runs around sort of the Prospect Park loop.
With socks?
With socks?
Yeah, and shin pads or?
Oh, no. I wish I was wearing full kit, but I can't afford that. I think with the Spurs store, I'll wait till Daniel Levy throws a few more discounts in there on the daily Instagram posts of the players. But I feel like that was sort of a match that made me feel like I did, kind of in the beginning of my days as a Spurs fan, sort of like post, Redknapp, kind of beginning days of Villas-Boas. And I felt like it was, where those days were the years where I really would sort of not celebrate like a lot of clubs do, like trophies. And I would celebrate, the wins against Man United or like the random wins against Chelsea on the day. That would be my real like highlight of the season. And it kind of felt like that was, kind of the inner, sort of young person in me again, where I just sort of felt, happy again to, just be, just beating Man United again in sort of like a very Spurs way. And I do kind of miss, sitting back for 90 minutes and then hitting people on the counter. I did kind of enjoy kind of the sneakiness of that. But, it's nice to actually feel like, we can play a brand of football that I sort of recognized from maybe when I first started kind of becoming a Spurs fan is what I would say. And, those were the days where I would cherish sort of these wins.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say I'm as excited as I've been since peak Pochettino, and I guess maybe everyone else is feeling that a little bit. And I know it's only 2 games, but 8 weeks has felt like a lot longer than 8 weeks. Incredibly short amount of time to embed that style of football at Spurs. Imagine what it's going to be like when it clicks, HG. I mean, this is just like phase 1 Ange ball out of phase 5, maybe?
Yeah, you'd hope there's a few more phases to go. I mean, this is the thing. Like, we're all excited. Like, the Brentford game, obviously, the goals we conceded weren't great, and they were a bit fortunate for Brentford, really. The penalty, I still think, was quite soft, and the deflection, obviously, for the second. But this feels like Spurs. Like, we understand we're not a great defensive side, but we're going to do our best to stop the other team scoring because we want to have the ball. And that is, it's got the ridiculous Guardiola, possession is 9/10 of football or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Spurs want to be. Like this idea that, I mean, I saw what Gary Neville said in the week about like Spurs or Ange being some kind of like fake knockoff of Pep Guardiola, and what we're trying to do is ineffective. And I'm like, you do realize we just beat your lot.
Was it
Yeah.
Porro's trying to be
Yeah.
Rodri or something like that with the comment? I don't know.
I don't
He's-
know.
he's-
Yeah, that's what he said.
yeah.
It was just kind of pathetic. Like, we all know that there are levels to go, but we're excited to see it. With the fact that we're seeing Bissouma play like I can't. Even Dembele didn't do some of the stuff that Bissouma can do, and I mean that genuinely. Like, Dembele got near the 18-yard box and he was no interest. He had no interest in getting involved in that. We've seen in pre-season. We saw last week Bissouma in the box. He's doing step overs and flicks and dragging the ball back. And it feels as if he's doing it in his living room, and that's really encouraging to see. And so, yeah, of course, I hope that this week we'll win again, and hopefully by the end of September we'll still be unbeaten, and all of those levels will come into play, because Spurs right now, no one really knows how good we can get.
Confidence breeds confidence, doesn't it, Jack? That's the nature of football, and you see players like Bissouma should only get more confident with 2 man of the match awards on the trot. So he's probably got a few more tricks up his sleeve. He's going to slip in there.
He's kind of quickly embracing that main character role that I guess everybody sort of played out for him. I guess this season, everybody thought that he was going to be kind of the main guy in the season, and he was going to be the main character this season. And I think he's pretty much proving that. There's no doubt about it right now. And you kind of start to think about, when was the last time that you started to see maybe shades of a world-class midfielder, I guess, at Spurs again. And I don't know. I think that's what Bissouma is sort of giving me. As much as I am a part of the, strong and very loyal, Hojbjerg crew, I don't think any of us would ever say that he was a world-class midfielder or anything.
Well, no, he is. He is world-class at passing it sideways and back. No one does it better.
In the case of Bissouma, though, it's like it's more of an undoubtable. Like, everybody just when you watch him play for more than 15 minutes in this sort of system, you think there's not really many that could do it much better than that. And sort of the all range that he does it. He's either winning the ball back and covering, a huge amount of ground to be able to do it. That was something that he actually did well, I think, under Conte, was that even when he was kind of chained to this sort of role, he did do a good job at sort of like covering like laterally, like so much space defensively in order to win the ball back for us. But now that he's been given this license to be able to actually look up and not look sideways, like maybe Conte was telling everybody to, he's able to show more of this kind of world-class ability. And I think it's actually crazy as well that, he's able to basically break a press entirely on his own. And that's why I think even he was basically man-marked in the first 45 minutes, by Bruno Fernandes and, like Marcus Rashford and those players, because they know that if you give him time on the ball, he is going to basically just run the whole show for 90 minutes. So you might as well just make life a little bit difficult for him. So that's something I think to even look out for, is he will probably start to be man-marked for the rest of the season, where they will just throw somebody on him that might just be, willing to run his lungs out for the rest of the game, as long as they make life difficult for Bissouma, because it almost seems like a bad idea for any team if you just kind of let him pick up the ball from the center backs and just sort of run the game, because I think you're not going to get the ball back basically. It's
true, but then you've got Maddison to think about as well from an opposition perspective, and that makes it difficult, doesn't it? And then Sarr's emergence, you're almost swamped, aren't you? How can you man mark two players? It's difficult, right?
I'm not just going to say this because I think it will make me look good, but a couple of years ago when we needed a manager every summer, but a couple of years ago when we got Nuno, there was big rumours about us going for Ten Hag, right? And I didn't want him, and I said
made that clear.
Yeah, I did make it clear I didn't want him, because there was just something that to me he isn't inspiring. He just isn't, and I feel that's what the best managers are. Like, they may not be tub thumpers like Klopp, right? But then, Ange isn't a tub thumper. Like, I don't get the impression that he's there on the training pitch, shouting and screaming and saying, I want it to be like heavy metal football. Mm-hmm. But you see in the press conferences the type of man he is. Guardiola also doesn't give that, Jurgen Klopp, but that they have something as managers that means the players want to go with them, want to do what they're asked to do. With Ten Hag, he may recreate that Ajax side from 18-19, but he probably won't be able to, because he won't be able to buy Frenkie de Jong. And until then, Man United will be probably what Spurs have been the last few years. Like, they might make the Champions League if everyone else has a bad season, but probably if everyone's on fire, they won't. And I'm just happy that I'm happy that we have Ange. Like, as much as the last 2 years has sucked, at least in watching Tottenham,
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it. I don't want Ten Hag for the last 2 seasons and then be spent another load of money. It just feels like Ange is the fit for Spurs perfectly.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, HG. Completely agree. And Ten Hag, he's not inspirational, is he? As you say, I just think that when you listen to Andrew's speeches, particularly the Australian one, and I love that the way he finishes it. Now go have your lunch. It's
Go and have
brilliant.
your lunch.
His speeches and motivation. There's a good article about it in the Athletic this week, and he's a great orator, and I think that comes across. But equally in press conferences, he doesn't appear to hate the press like Conte or Nuno didn't want to talk in press conferences at all. If you think back, so it's great having a character there that both the fans and the players can sort of relate to a little bit and is likable. Because although we like Conte because he's a bastard, he's our bastard kind of thing. It doesn't get you very far in the long term, and I think that obviously.
And that's just it. I feel like for anyone who's around, Jack is 20 years younger than me, probably, so maybe I shouldn't say this, but anyone who's around my age, like my favourite manager of my lifetime is Martin Jol, right? And it wasn't necessarily because we weren't as good under him as we were under Pochettino. I loved Spurs under Pochettino, but I didn't love him like I loved Jol. And Ange has that. There is something different. Like I want to support a team managed by Ange.
Yeah.
Like there's just that kind of personality deserves to be liked. And I understand that, he may not love the press. He deals with them kind of like I deal with my in-laws. I like them, but let's be honest, I don't want to talk to them that much.
They don't watch the show, do they, HG?
I doubt it. Even if they did, I'm thousands of miles from where they are. It's great. But the point is, like, I love them, right? I realise they're a part of my life, and I'm quite happy to be with them. But Ange and the press, it's definitely I'm going to keep you sweet, but actually despise you inside. And I feel like it's what Ange does. He genuinely, with him and the media, is not like it works because he knows what can keep them happy. And maybe that's him. He understands what makes people happy. If you're the press, you need this. If you're certain players, you need something different. If you're the fans, you need to hear what we hear. Like he understands what it's like to be.
Intelligence, isn't it?
It's interesting you say that because I read a quote by Micky van der Ven this week, and he's basically its quote goes, "Ange is very direct." So his messaging is probably very simple, but yet very digestible for the players to follow as well. So he might Ange might be this character to the press, but to the players, which is incredibly important. He's very direct and probably very simple with what he demands and wants. And that's why the players maybe are playing the way Ange wants them to play, because he's direct and probably very digestible to the actual players in his communication. So there's probably, how would you say, a bonus in that he knows how to relate to the players and communicate what he wants to the players.
He doesn't look like he would crack, though, like under the press, under any sort of question. Like he did quite well this whole summer under the 14 questions he would be given, about Harry Kane, and then, maybe 2 about Spurs and about him. But, compared to, you think about Antonio Conte, who would do everything in riddles and rhymes and like sort of make everything very mysterious about what he really meant versus what he's actually saying. Every now and again, he would sort of break, and he would like break from that character, and he would just sort of like leak something that, wasn't, as much of a, a riddle or something like that. And he would just sort of say what he meant. And then everybody was so shocked and alarmed once all of a sudden he said what he meant. And I think it's something like with Jose too, where Jose also has this sort of like weird charisma where he kind of like says what he means, but doesn't really say what he means. And I think we're finally getting a guy who just sort of straight talks in every single situation that he is. And so he's not going to get caught up in kind of, twisting his words or anything like that. And I think that means we're not going to have any moments where, the press, there's going to be some big breakdown, from Ange, like we saw from Jose or we did with Conte or others. And that's what I find. And that's typical of other managers, though, because I think other managers, they seem to like talk in a certain voice, with the press. They speak in a certain way with them. And then every now and again, they're going to break character because they're human beings. Whereas like Ange actually seems to act like a human being in front of the press as best he can. So it doesn't look like he's ever going to get caught up in anything at any stage. Like
and he's been tested as well. He's had a lengthy apprenticeship, obviously with the Australian job. He had the Victory job, the Raw job. And the Aussie press does test personalities down here. We do have the tall poppy syndrome as well, but I find that the infamous Craig Foster interview, amongst other things, have probably taught Ange to speak in a certain way, if that makes sense, to be a bit more savvy with the press and not be reactionary like he was early in his days. So I don't think you're going to see. I think you're going to see mature media performances from Ange compared to maybe his earlier stints as a coach, where he was a bit reactionary and probably had a bit more attitude about him. He's in his mid to late 50s, so we're talking about a guy that's pretty seasoned and has had a lengthy apprenticeship.
We love Ange.
Ange. And just to be clear, the cheese room was always Ange in before anyone had heard of Ange. Just for the record, it was JP and you, to be honest, Cameron. But I'll roll on your coattails, no problem whatsoever. Let's talk about the Cherries. They drew so far this season. They've had a 1-1 draw with West Ham home, and then a 3-1 defeat to 10-man Liverpool at Anfield in a match where they actually took the lead 1-0 after about 3 minutes. So should we be worried about this game, Cameron?
I'd be daring and say no. I think under Ange, it's just our second away game. I don't know too much about the Cherries per se, and I know they had a few changes off season, but I think this is just as a statement game as what last week was, going away from home. Ange's methodology
just went 2-0 up, unfortunately, on Luton, by the way.
I was hoping Luton could jag one in. I actually think Ange should go full throttle at this. It's the players are believing in Ange. The players are believing in his methodologies. I actually think we could go there 2-3-0, even with the Cherries putting up a decent fight. But I do think that there's starting to be a momentum build under Ange at the moment. And I think if the players follow what he says, I think we can walk out with a W. And I do think that our confidence is high in it. I actually think we'll win. I don't know too much about the Cherries, I give him, but I do think there's a good vibe at the moment, as we've started off with it in this show. And I can't see why we can't take the W away from Bournemouth. And I don't know if Maddison's playing, but I do think that I think I can see Richarlison scoring this game. So
you're getting ahead of yourself now, Cameron. You're getting ahead of yourself.
There's confidence and then there's overconfidence.
That's it. HG, what do we know about Bournemouth? So if you look at them on paper, they are, fairly boring. Solanke, their biggest threat, would you say?
Yeah, I would. I feel like Bournemouth right now have a potential to kind of do what Brighton did a few seasons ago. Because when Brighton sacked Chris Hughton and everyone went up in arms about how could they do this, don't Brighton know their place? They were scraping 16th, 17th each season to stay in the Premier League, and their owner said no. And we can see where Brighton are now to feel that he obviously made the right decision in appointing Potter and further on with De Zerbi. But like Bournemouth, obviously, are a lot. They haven't gone as far down that road, but they stayed up last season when no one expected them to. When Gary O'Neill took over and they lost 9-0 under Parker, and then he left and it was all kind of like, Bournemouth are surely just going to get worse from here under a manager that had never managed before at any level. And yet he kept them up, and they had a pretty good recent run of results towards the end of the season. They beat us, although that wasn't that rare by the time they did it. But and so you have to think that he kept them up, and the same thing happened. They got rid of their homegrown English manager that we're all supposed to love. And brought in someone from abroad that they'd obviously had their eyes on for a while. And so, yes, they've only got 1 point from their first 2 games, but they've played the same system in both games. They're clear about what they want to do. Apparently, I saw in one of the comments, I think it's from Kevin here, that their new manager also comes well in his press conferences. He's a pretty young guy who obviously did pretty well in Spain before coming to the Premier League. And so, obviously, I'm positive about Spurs because I think we are getting better week in, week out. But so are Bournemouth. They have little to lose, I would say. and they like to play with wingers. Which, if there are teams that are going to hurt Spurs, it'll be ones that play with pace down the wings because we'd like to invert our fullbacks. So, look, it's not going to be an easy game, but I do think
Semenyo, is another threat, isn't he?
Semenyo, so yeah, obviously he scored at Anfield, but Solanke has done it at Championship level. It looks like he's finally settling to the Premier League and scoring goals. So they obviously do have threats, but I don't look at them as individuals, right? I don't see any individual quality really in that Bournemouth side. I see a team that will work for each other. And if Spurs fans haven't figured this out by now, teams beat individuals. So we have to work as a team, and Ange knows that, right? So it's not. I don't expect us to be out fought as a team, but Bournemouth have the quality to score against us. They do, and that's not because our defence isn't great. It just means they have qualities. They can score at Anfield, which Spurs have done, but I'm never confident about us going there and scoring. So I feel as if Bournemouth, it's a difficult game, but it's one that Spurs have to go there thinking they will win. And working towards that. A point at Bournemouth will feel to me as disappointed as I was after the 2-2 at Brentford. And I was disappointed after that game.
Yeah, I thought we should have won. Jack, what do you know about Bournemouth, apart from it's on the south coast? It's where our Redknapp lives.
I know that I liked Gary O'Neill. Like, I was a little sad that they kind of sacked him. I thought he did a pretty good job, considering that Scott Parker seemed to cry and whine about that team. And then, Gary O'Neill seemed to do a pretty okay job with it. I guess he got a bit of investment. He got a bit of investment in January, but still, like I said, Scott Parker really complained a lot about, I thought, that team that he was handed. And Gary O'Neill sort of took that and then I think embarrassed him with how well he did with that squad.
Yeah.
And I think at the same time, for what we've seen from defensive transitional counterattacking teams, like his wasn't like the most negative. Like it felt like there was some sort of progressive elements to it. Like even the time that they played us at home, which was kind of early in the season, he still like found a way to sort of find some interesting ways to sort of kind of score. And he scored a lot of goals against us and he made life difficult for us. But this Iraola guy seems to be completely different to Gary O'Neill, or that's what Bournemouth fans are saying, that he's completely different. So I think all the lessons that maybe we would have been taking from the last game, I'm not sure if they apply now since Gary O'Neill's gone, because I think he set them up in a sort of like counterattacking kind of way that really hurt us and really helped, them, because they really seemed to pinpoint Dier and Davies. I remember had really atrocious games against Solanke and Kiefer Moore in particular. And I'm not sure if Iraola is going to do that. He seems to do like one striker. He seems to press a bit higher up the pitch, all those sort of things. So I think it might end up being a different game. If it was a similar manager to what it was last season, I would be a bit more worried. But now that it's kind of a, maybe let's say a more progressive manager like Iraola, I think I'm actually less worried, because I think that plays into Spurs' hands a bit more. Where if they set up it maybe a bit more like Brentford did, kind of like Thomas Frank, I would actually be a bit more worried, because I think they could hit us on the counter, and if they're organized enough, we would find probably some trouble. Like Brentford, I think, did cause us a lot of trouble. And if, Bournemouth don't really set up that way, which according to their fans, they probably won't, to some degree, I think that actually plays in our hands.
Yeah, and if you look at the teams that Bournemouth have put out, I mean, it's a pretty new side. It's a young side, and they're not really used to playing with each other. Like I look at the 11 that started at Anfield, and the goalkeeper's pretty new. Max Aarons has been there a couple of weeks. The other fullback's been there, came this summer. Semenyo has not been there that long. Jadon Anthony, I don't even know where he came from. Suddenly he became like, was he at West Ham as a kid and then suddenly got moved to Bournemouth? But it's a young side that's going to develop and you would imagine get better as they go on in the season. But they've bought a lot of players in that 10 to 20 million pound range, hoping to build something. Right? I mean,
range.
I don't use range, but Justin Cloudfoot has gone there. They've bought some, let's say, some talents, some people, some highly rated players, like the left back who also came from Dutch football, was almost certainly going to Italy at some point in the summer, and then he showed up at Bournemouth. And like, obviously, we can't help but look at Bournemouth and see that they've got a stadium of 11, 12,000. You don't see them as being a Premier League team consistently, But the only way they're going to do that is if they do what they've been doing, which is buying the younger talents. And they bought, obviously, Alex Scott as well, the American guy, Tyler Adams came.
Yeah.
Like, they're buying decent players. I mean, and I'm probably underselling them. They are good players that want to prove themselves in the Premier League. And, like, when Spurs went through this process 15 odd years ago under Martin Jol, that's what we did. We bought a load of young talent and said, right, if you're good enough, you'll stick. And some of you won't, but we'll go and do that. And Bournemouth are doing the same. And they've got a manager who, although different to Gary O'Neill, is one that has the future in mind and will understand that, maybe his better players will get sold every season. But that's Bournemouth's role in the food chain right now.
The one worry I do have is they scored 5 goals over 2 matches, and they've actually improved, like kind of HG was just saying, as a team. Like, they've improved on certain players in certain positions. So come to think of it, like, even though it's a different manager who will set up differently, the players have not gotten worse. I would say that their whole 11 has actually improved for the most part. So
as
that
a
is
unit.
a slight worry. Yeah, that is a slight worry. Because they embarrassed us, I think, last season.
They did. I was there, and it was, it was a horrible game to watch, if I'm being really honest, because we sat back so deep, and it's just,
But that's under Conte, wasn't it?
No,
but still, like, those players will be better than what they were last season. I think those Bournemouth players, even if the manager we had set up a certain way, like Philip Billing has better players to play to, he has better fullbacks, greater serve. I don't know, like. Despite all that.
But it sounds like a simple question. Now a different manager in place, do you still have the same apprehensions? As in Postecoglou?
If they kept the same team, I would say I would not be as worried. But now that I think about it a little bit deeper, the fact that it's a different manager, but they've also improved the 11 quite significantly, meaning he's gotten some sort of backing of some kind. This manager gives me some, if I were to be worried, then I would be worried about that. I'm not worried, but at first I had a lot of confidence, but I did just think about that. It's not like a manager that's inherited the same squad. He's inherited a different squad. So it could be a different Bournemouth.
I mean, I feel
there's going to be bumps in the road, isn't there, with this, with Ange's system, and it's still we're 2 games in, we're 2 games in, so I think it might be a bit much to expect us to click and wipe them off the face of the earth.
I think the good thing is it's not just the Bournemouth game. Obviously, we've got Burnley. And taking the next league game, Sheffield United after that. I mean, a lot of those teams have had quite a lot of upheaval. And so we're looking at Spurs, and we're expecting Spurs to have those bumps in the road early on. But we're playing teams who are actually in a pretty similar situation to us. Like, until we play the Goons, I mean, Man United are relatively well set, but they played a couple of new players against us. But the system hasn't really changed. But
They've got no excuses.
No, but with Bournemouth, new manager, new system, or a slightly, same formation, but a different kind of way of playing the game. Burnley, despite having gone up and spent some money under company, they've spent another load of money this summer to try and improve. Like, I feel like their big summer signing when they went down just went out on loan. So like they're also looking to get these players. Burnley have that. I mean, I don't want to talk about Burnley too much, but they bought a young American guy who I'd never heard of from like Espanyol reserves, and he started their first game against Man City. So they're also looking around to try and build. And you would think that these teams are going to get better as the season progresses, in the same way that Spurs hopefully will. So perhaps it's a good time for us to be playing teams that are in a similar state than we are, because you would hope that we have better quality, or at least more proven quality than they do.
Well, on to the Spurs side of things, I do need to get a beer, so bounce this one round between you. But we'll start with you, Cameron. In fact, I might go, as Jack's here, I might go for a gin with some garnish.
Supermarkets have now replaced the garnish, conversation. Now
definitely, it's always something. Line up for Spurs. Have a little bounce around. Maddison apparently is fit, but I don't think he's going to be 100%, is he? John's pointed out to me, this is tragic, 137 watching, 38 likes. Come on, sort it out, guys, and hit the subscribe while you're there. Starting with you, Cameron. Spurs lineup to face Bournemouth, and talk us through your 1 to 11, mate.
To be honest, and yes, I'll play it safe again, I'd like to see last week's lineup. I actually really enjoyed last week's lineup. If Maddison plays, keep it as is of what it was last week. Vicario, Romero, Van der Ven, Bissouma, Dodgy, Porro. Although it wasn't the most dynamic, sleek unit, you could tell that your Porros and your Dodgies were still fitting into the system. I enjoyed watching Porro. He wasn't perfect, but I enjoyed his drives down the right there. I keep things as is if Maddison does play. So if Ange is saying he is playing, I have a hunch, knowing how Ange thinks and talks, that he will play. I don't think he'll play the whole game, but I do think I would like to keep things as is. Keep it stable.
Jack, what about you?
I kind of feel like Ange, if I were in Ange's head, or if I were Ange, I feel like he's the guy that would play Porro again, knowing that, he won a game with Porro. But at the same time, I feel like Emerson didn't play all that bad where he would be that concerned. And I think Emerson, also considering, played pretty well away from home and got us that goal that we ended up needing, at the end of the day. And I think the difference between Porro and Emerson actually is, while Porro is a lot better, I think, technically on the ball, he doesn't have the strength, I think, that Emerson does, to be able to hold up the ball. Because when you're asking the guy to kind of step into infield, he is going to have his back to goal sometimes. And there will be a guy like kind of trying to clatter through him, trying to win the ball. And Emerson seems to have the strength actually to be able to just hold up the ball, kind of do a stupid no-look pass to somebody and kind of calm things down for a little bit. Or like Pedro Porro, I kind of rewatched at least only the first 45 minutes. But in that first 20 minutes, he did struggle with that sort of pressure. And he did. I'm not saying Bournemouth will do that, but I'm sort of saying that I feel like Pedro Porro, he sort of has maybe some things still to work on, I think, in that it felt like he took a lot of risks. Like he takes these risks in possession that Emerson doesn't. Emerson seems to be much more content just to hold up the ball, give it to somebody else in kind of a cool, calm, collected manner, and let someone else kind of take those risks, which I actually think away from home is maybe the better choice anyways, because you do want to not start as sort of nervously as I think we did against Man United, because as well as we played, I think we were also very nervous. And I think a guy like Emerson, ironic as this does sound, those sort of like no-look passes and kind of like flicks and tricks seem to sort of kind of calm and cool the possession a little bit, where we're not making as many risky passes. We can actually dominate the ball a bit more, kind of, sit in their half a bit longer. Whereas Pedro Porro, in my opinion, kind of, until he started to warm up into the game, that's when we started to see his real attributes, what he brings that Emerson doesn't, balls and what he kind of can do in possession. But in the first 20 minutes, I was a little worried with kind of just how often he was giving the ball away. Whereas with Emerson, I would say, as boring as he might be to some people in possession, he doesn't give the ball away actually that often. He usually kind of makes the right decision with who to give it to kind of just keep the possession going. So if any change I would make, it would be Emerson. That would be the only change. And then the other thing I would consider is just give Lo Celso some minutes just in case Maddison is injured or just needs some time off, from that sort of knock that he took. Or also, let's say we are only like one goal up, or only, it's 0-0 or it's a tight game. I'd say you throw on Lo Celso with Maddison at the same time for some extra ideas and just some extra invention. Those would be the only things I would say.
I mean, I think the comment here from King Hoddle, I suspect a lot of Spurs fans feel this way, right? Like if Maddison isn't good enough to play, at least to start the game, then Lo Celso is the right choice, especially because Maddison's been playing on the left-hand side of the three. So you would think Lo Celso, being naturally left-footed, would suit that role more. But look, I'm not going to lie, part of me doesn't expect that to happen. As much as I think it probably should, I just think Ange will do what he thinks is right. I mean, obviously, every manager will do that, but I don't know if he sees it quite in the same way that we do. Right? Well, I think we all recognise that Lo Celso has more of the qualities that Maddison does than anyone else. Right?
Yeah.
We haven't seen Sarr be that creative midfielder. We haven't really seen Hojbjerg do it because our midfielders haven't been in the opposition half for most of the last 2 seasons. So it's weird to imagine it, and weirdly enough, we've seen this also do it away from Spurs. So you get this idea that, okay, well, he could do it. I think if Ange is going to make changes, he's going to make it to the wings, let's say. So it'll be one of the fullbacks or one of the wingers. I don't see him making many changes, and I think, especially early on, like the spine of the team, Like if the goalkeeper is set, we know that's not going to change. You'd imagine right now the back two are set. Like unless there's an injury, those two will start every game. So it's okay with Richarlison, we're not really sure, but probably given the I would say lack of options, he may start a number of games. Bissouma is clearly going to start most games. So to me at least, the spine, the body of the side won't change too much. But maybe we'll see Solomon start. Maybe we'll see Perisic start. That seems unlikely because Son is the captain of the club. But I think that we are likely to see a couple of changes. But where? It's anyone's guesses. I saw one of the comments talking about how that apparently he said that most of the squad will play in the next 3 games. Clearly, that means that we might see a lot of rotation midweek, but still, it's a chance for people to come in. And we saw that with Pochettino a lot. We'd see 7, 8 changes between the various competitions. I don't think, and you can clip this when it's clearly wrong, but I don't think Ange is going to do that. I think he might make 4 or 5, but again, he'll keep certain areas or certain partnerships together. There's no benefit right now for Ange to break up the Van de Ven Romero partnership because the next in line is Sanchez and he might be leaving in the next week. So you would think that it's going to go along those lines, but I don't see many changes, but I'm okay with that because we won last week.
What do you make? What do you make to this comment from Next Level English, Cameron?
If you think Dier will start, you will do and believe all kinds of noise. The man can't stand Spurs and does not want to be there, and so he will not play. I hold my comment there. I think, given the limited exposure I've seen of Gio under Ange, I think there is a future there. I disagree with Next Level English, respectfully. The noises that have come around in and around Gio at Spurs are not substantiated, so I don't know. Hopefully he does want to stay. I think there is a chance that I think Ange could bring him on tonight. Sorry, tomorrow for you, tonight for me, because it's prime time watching for me tonight, 9:30 kickoff in Australia. Wow. So I will say that I think Ange has said there's a future for Gio there. I think Gio suits the system perfectly. I just think it's a wait and see at the moment. Yes, there's 1 week left in the transfer window, but I do think I think Gio's definitely got a future here, and the rumours that surround him, they're not substantiated. They're not true. They haven't been founded out. I think there's definite future for Gio, and I think Ange will prove that, and will probably be one of the success stories in this season.
I think to answer that though, just Romero has even just spoken recently, and like some quotes have come about, and he's said that Gio is very happy here and wants to stay, and that he has a lot of confidence in Gio sort of kind of, rekindling some sort of relationship with kind of the Spurs fans. He's also just recently had a child. That child, I think, was had in London, and he seems to, be enjoying himself in London. I follow most of the players on Instagram, and usually Gio never would make any sort of. Gio pretty much made it. He did his best job. He did his best job to make it look like he did not play for Spurs. If you looked at his Instagram page and if you looked at his social media, now all of a sudden, he looks like a Spurs player, and he's walking around with a stroller in London, and he's having time with his wife and kids, and it just looks like he's here to stay, and it looks like he's in some way embracing the club, and he's going for a second chance. And I've heard this before in podcasts and stuff about players, but you can see sometimes in certain cases a lot of players' sort of attitude about their career or whatever does change when they have a child or when they have a kid, because then all of a sudden they realize that maybe I should actually try my best to get this Spurs wage and stick around in London and make the best sort of life for my family. And maybe it's not the best.
All we need is for Tongi to breed
from Villarreal to Sevilla to Bundesliga.
Am I right?
No, caller. I mean, it was a brilliant comment, but no, we don't need Tongi to breed.
Okay.
I just thought it was interesting when Jack was talking about like having children. I thought he was going to talk about Antonio Conte, but he didn't. But I mean, that's part of it too. Like, we're all Spurs fans for a very long time, right? Like, some of us chose it, some of us were born into it, but we have been Spurs fans for a long time. Lo Celso has had to work under Jose and flipping Conte when he's been here, right? I mean, that's the funny thing. He was injured under Poch for most of it. He was sent out on loan, I think, twice by Conte. I'm not sure. I'm not saying Jose ever sent him on loan. I think Conte sent him twice. So now that Conte's gone, you'd imagine, yeah, his attitude towards Spurs would have changed. I'm not saying I expect him to be like a really important player. Like, I still think that Hojbjerg might start ahead of him. I don't think Skipp will, but Skipp started the first game. So you look at all those midfielders we've got. Lo Celso is the only one that hasn't played any minutes. So I thinking he'll start. You know, I'd be surprised if Maddison's out. I still would be surprised, but I don't think he hates Spurs. I think he just hated the situation. And let's face it, most fans hated watching Spurs. I mean, most Spurs fans hated watching Spurs. We did it out of a sense of duty, but Lo Celso doesn't have that. He just wants to play football. And if he's not going to do that at Spurs, he'll go somewhere else and do it. And I think that's okay. I don't think it's hating the club. I think it was just hating what kind of club we were.
There's been an awful lot of nonsense written around Lo Celso as well, I think, you know. But there's a lot of nonsense written full stop, isn't it? For example, the cheese room is funded by the club, apparently, according to some podcasters, which, you know, I'm still waiting for my hospitality ticket.
It seems like I mean, I don't want to get all political, but it seems like something you would say if you were funded by the club and you wanted to push attention away from yourself and just accuse everybody else of doing what you would actually do. Not naming any political parties who would do that, obviously. But,
Romero, Dier is a fantastic player, can bring so much to Tottenham. He's an intelligent player. I've always liked Lo Celso, actually, because I think he works really hard for the team on the pitch, and I think he offers you a little bit of defensive cover, which, for example, Dembele never did. And he's very creative, very creative. I think you saw that in pre-season. And if if Messi rates him, then I do.
I just want to point out, like, Next Level English, it's a great topic. It really is. So thank you for your comment. But what you wrote here, doesn't that describe how you feel too? I mean, everyone has brought in quotes about what Romero said, and you've come up with what people want to be true is what they think is true. Give us your evidence, mate. We've got quotes from players. It's not us, but we have something to back that up. Maybe you're right. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I think you're wrong, but I'm not going to say you are. But it's not hard to put two and two together. Well, I mean, Lo Celso looks pretty happy at Spurs. He has seemed pretty happy. That's all we're basing it on. And now we've had quotes today that make us think that maybe there's something behind it. But I'm not going to say he'll be here September 2nd, because I think if a bid came in, maybe he wouldn't be. But I don't think he hates Spurs. I think that's something that we could probably I think and probably, I don't know. But I find it very weird if he actually hated the club, especially because we are a very different club now to what we were 3-4 months ago.
Right. So if Maddison is out, you'd play Gio, but who do you think will play? Skipp or Hojbjerg?
Isn't Pape Matar going to give another?
Sarr will be playing anyway, wouldn't he? If Maddison...
Yeah, Sarr will play. So you're saying Gio will not be? You think there's a?
Well, I think HG is correct. I think Gio will be a bench from the bench, which is pretty much what HG.
If Maddison is out, though, I think Postecoglou has full faith that Gio is sort of seen as the backup.
Oh, right. So you do think he'll play, but I don't. I don't. You see, I think it.
What's your starting lineup, caller?
What with Maddison fit, then it's the same as last week. Although I'd probably change Emerson for Porro.
Okay. I think if he isn't fit, Maddison, you seem to think Hojbjerg or Skipp will
naturally,
play.
I'd play my son, Ollie Skipp. Family first and all that. I probably would. I mean, I would play Lo Celso, but I think Ange might well play Skippy in that position.
No, I don't think he will, because I think he played Pape Matar for a reason, because he might have been disappointed with what he saw with Skipp against Brentford.
I know, but Sarr's a given in the team, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think Skipp and Sarr are sort of rotating in the same position as sort of these kind of box-to-box sort of type players. And then there's this other position, which is sort of this more creative, number 8, number 10 position, which I think Maddison is playing right now. And I think he sees Lo Celso as probably the alternative, or maybe even Tanguy is the other alternative to, Lo Celso in case Lo Celso wasn't fit. But I don't think Skipp he would ever see as, taking up that sort of role. At least I don't see Skipp that way. And to be honest, I trust that Ange, doesn't see Skipp in that sort of, household. I think at the end of the day, Skipp is going to be rotating with Sarr and competing with Sarr for that sort of position.
There you go.
And losing most weeks.
We'll see who's right next week. Bookmark this show. Next level. We'll see you next week.
I feel like with Ange right now, his choices are very much stick or twist, right? Or be brave or be safe. Right? We could sit here and say that Emerson is probably a safer option than Porro. We'll score more goals with Porro, you would think, and we'll concede fewer with Emerson, you would think. And it's the same with this choice. If Maddison is out, how attacking do we want to be? Are we worried? Again, there's nothing in Skipp's game or in Hojbjerg's game that makes me think we're going to need them to counterattack the running power that Bournemouth might have, because they don't really have it. And Lo Celso, we all know he's a hard-working player. So it really is a question of what kind of midfield does Ange want to have? I think I was surprised that Skipp started the first game. I was. I thought Bissouma would, and obviously I thought Maddison would, but I didn't think Skipp would be first up. And so it's interesting that Sarr got the nod last week and will obviously play, but what Ange will do?
Yeah, he obviously had scored twice against Barcelona, though, hadn't he?
Well, yeah, but I mean, Jake Livermore scored against Barcelona. Lucas Moura scored. Eric Lamela scored against Barcelona.
Hey,
it's
not about hatred on this show.
I'm just saying it's not that great a barometer, and he needed a deflection to do it, whereas the others didn't. Look, I don't know. I could see Ange. What do I know about Ange? Logically, you'd think, okay, if I'm going to go attacking with one, I might go defensive with the other. However way you play that. Maybe I'll have Porro as an attacking fullback, and I'll start Hojbjerg, who, let's face it, none of us really think he'll be around next week. If we can get a replacement in for him, we probably will. So it's an interesting dilemma, but where Ange goes, it would be... I feel, it sounds crazy, I feel as if it's between Lo Celso and Hojbjerg, whoever starts has more of a future at Spurs under Ange. And perhaps we all hope that's Lo Celso. I don't know.
Yeah.
Goading your HG. Goading.
Yeah. No, I'm glad he's gone. I took him personally, drove him personally to Sevilla. Glad he's there. I got him to win a trophy. So, it's so old.
We're moving on.
I have never known anyone be so loved for so little. For so little.
I think that's the Spurs way.
It's like Gary Doherty. It's like everyone having a hard-on for Gary Doherty. Awful, woeful player. Just terrible. Yes, but he tries hard.
Yeah. Gary Doherty or Eric Lamela?
Well, as what?
At the club, if you're to pick a player, have at the club.
If I want Gary Doherty, if I want a centre back, I'll pick Gary Doherty. If I want a centre forward, I'll pick Gary Doherty. If I want someone to get more bookings than goals, I might go for Eric Lamela.
I think Romero's disciplinary record is worse, but there you go. I want to ask this question: has anyone surprised you so far in a Spurs shirt? So, Cameron, I'm going to go to you first.
So far, in the limited amount of games, I didn't watch the Brentford game. I've really liked Van der Ven. Everyone was talking tap sober, but I've really liked watching Van der Ven for the limited time that I've seen him. He's huge. He's extremely quick, and I've been quite surprised how steady most of the time he has been. I grant that I didn't know much about him prior to that, but besides your obvious Bissoumas, I've liked a dodgy, but Van der Ven, I've been really surprised at how good he's been.
HG.
who have I been most surprised with? Like, it sounds crazy, but probably Bissouma. Like, that year under Conte, I'd forgotten what it was like at Brighton.
Yeah.
Like, bearing in mind, when he played at Brighton, I may only have seen him 5 times a season, the 2 games against Spurs, and maybe if I'd sat and watched Brighton. But Potter's Brighton were mid-table at best. So you'd see him. I saw him have good games against Arsenal, so I liked him for that. But I didn't really know how good he was. I knew he was a good player, and I felt like it was a great signing. But having not seen that for a year, to suddenly see this guy take over midfield, like he wants the ball no matter what, no matter where he is. I have been surprised by it because it feels like I'd forgotten that player even existed.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Next Level English is still going on about the Celso. Next Level English, I've got to tell you, I want to see your face when he's in the starting 11 tomorrow.
Ahead of your boy Skipp.
Hey?
Ahead of your boy Skipp, then, if Lo Celso is.
I would put him ahead of my boy Skipp, but there you go. Yeah, Jack, who surprised you?
I would just say Destiny Udogie because if it was sort of, in a way, like, it was almost as if from a lot of like Serie A like experts, or I say that with quotations, and like journalists and whatnot, like they really made it out to be that he could not play in a back 4 and that he was so specialized to like a back 5, back 3 system. And I just can't recall one single, like I feel like I listened to multiple interviews with Serie A experts and journalists that just continue to say, no, it won't cut it. He'll need time, or he might need to be loaned back, to someplace else to learn how to do it or whatever. And he seems to have had a pretty easy time of doing it. And also he's had some quotes that even come out that it said, yeah, I also see myself as a left back. It's how I originally even sort of got brought up, through Italy as well, until kind of, the left wing back, position kind of was made available in certain kind of systems. So I just, that's the thing I've been most surprised by is just Udogie. I think we all knew was going to be a brilliant player, but he has from game 1 pretty much made the Premier League look like a pretty easy transition, and has also made Ange Ball look like a pretty easy transition for the most part. So I'm just sort of kind of most shocked by a lot of what I was told about how he would struggle in a back 4 and struggle with the Premier League and struggle with all these things. So I'm almost kind of curious whether maybe they knew that we had secured such a diamond of a player that maybe they were like, trying to convince Spurs fans that, oh no, he needs time, loan him back to us, sort of thing, like as if it was out of jealousy or something like that. Because that's just the thing I was, because I can't claim to have watched Udinese really all that much last season. But so I kind of relied on what I thought were the experts, the people that do watch them a lot. And they really made it out to be that he couldn't play left back. And I think he obviously can. So I find that
I feel like
surprising.
The problem here is that Spurs don't really play with the back 4. Like not the traditional back 4 that they're probably describing when they say, oh, Udogie can't do that. He can't defend one-on-one. Like, to me, there's not much difference, like, character-wise between Sessegnon and Udogie. Like, they're both tall. They're both very left-footed. They're both quick. But one of them looks like he belongs on a football pitch and the other one doesn't. And that, to me, is the difference with Udogie, right? Like, he is a midfielder. Like, he might be a left back. He's just comfortable on the ball, but he's never going to be your Roberto Carlos left back who would defend stoutly and then bomb forward given the opportunity. But under Ange's system, that's not his job. No, his job is to be next to Bissouma, pretty much. If we've got the ball most of the game, like we want to have, his job is to help Bissouma. Same with Porro. None of us think Porro can defend in a back 4, if you think of it in a traditional sense. But here he is playing in a back 4 for Spurs.
Yeah. But I'm actually far more confident in Udogie than I am Porro, though. That's where how impressed I am with Udogie. Like, within the space of a game, I'm like, well, it looks like he can throw Embuemo to the ground if he ever needs to, and, things like that, which, Porro we know can't. And, like, those sort of things, like physically, awareness-wise, aerially, all those sort of things. He looks like he could sort of handle himself, where I couldn't say that about Pedro Porro, where he could really handle himself in that regard. So that's where I'm most impressed, is just that Pedro Porro has taken, he hasn't had all that much time, but he's taken more time than Destiny Udogie has needed. And that's what's most impressive, I think. Also, because he's 4 years younger or 3 years younger than even Pedro Porro is as well.
I feel like the main thing that's the two things about Udogie that I've really noticed in each game. One thing, in the first game, he was about to be subbed off, and then he used his pace to get back and stop an attack down Brentford's right. That kept him on the pitch because I really think he was coming off. He came off in the second game for Davies, but by that point, we were 1-up and hopefully, going on to win the game. But the second game, it was when he got the ball in midfield and actually kind of ran with the ball and beat a couple of Man United players. And he was on the right-hand side of the pitch when he's doing this, still in the centre, but more on the right-hand side. There's this idea that, I've got the ball, I can beat a man. And I think we've seen with Spurs that the ability to go past someone is really important in any football team, let alone one that's managed by Postecoglou. You've got to make defenders make decisions. And the only way you can do that is if your player has beat their man and suddenly another player doesn't know what to do. And we saw that with Udogie. He didn't do anything crazily fantastic, but he has the confidence to take players on either side and believe that he will keep the ball. He will lose it in the same way that Porro does, in the same way that a lot of our players will lose the ball over the season. But for a guy who's, 20, to be doing that, in England, granted, he may speak the language, but it's a new country for him. He wasn't here for a year. He stayed in Italy for that year. So for this to happen in 8 weeks under Ange, you can't fail but be impressed.
For me, I loved watching, being behind the goal actually, and watching the back four interact with each other was really good against United because they were all very fired up, and sometimes the stuff that happens off the ball is just as important. And Bissouma was coaching through Vicario, who I'm going to talk about in a minute as my surprise so far. He was, coaching Udogie. He was coaching through Porro. I think Bissouma. You forget he's 27. He's an experienced footballer, isn't he? And he really helps those youngsters. Van der Ven, another one, and he was talking them through the game almost. And if you've played football, you've got your talkers on the pitch. Bissouma is actually one of those guys. He'd be a good shout for captain, actually.
More talkative than Lloris, would you say?
Oh, loads more talkative than Lloris. Who I put that comment up to Triggy, but it didn't work, which was a shame. I was hoping to get a Lamella-esque reaction out of you.
What comment?
What was the comment? The surprise is, why is Lloris still at the club? Because Jack hates Lloris. But he didn't take the bait, unfortunately. But if I may, there's a few. Maddison's impressed me the way he's just slotted in. It's like he's always been here, and to do that straight away is really difficult. Udogie has been brilliant. Really can't fault him, but I think he will make mistakes. I think we saw in the preseason friendlies he got caught out a couple of times, so I think there will be minefields there. I could say Porro because he surprised me. I thought we were going to get slaughtered when I saw him in the starting 11 down his side, and he was decent in the second half certainly. Van der Ven again amazed me how easy he's made it look to slot into that team. But Vicario, I think I'm most happy for after a couple of games. And I'm not getting carried away. It is a couple of games. But Vicario played he had a sensational game against United. He kept us in it. He saved a one-on-one. Granted, I think one of them might have been offside. 2 absolute bullet headers from about 6 yards out. Gary Neville, the twat, said, he's made that look. He's made a easy save look really difficult there. I'm not being funny. I was sat behind the goal. His reaction time must have been milliseconds. The guy was 6 yards out and headed it full power at him, and he was full straight. It was a brilliant save, and he did it twice. So I got to say, he surpassed my expectations against United. He really did. Distribution was good. It's not hard to be a distribution upgrade from Hugo, let's be really honest. He did what he did well. So, he's probably not my biggest surprise, but I just don't want to badger on about Udogie or Bissouma a bit more. Yeah. But Vicario, for me, has been a breath of fresh air because I think what you've got with him is the shot stopping ability of Hugo with 50% more passing ability. And let's be clear, I do not think he is the next Edison. He's not going to ping balls, 40 yards on your foot. But I think he, in terms of distribution, he's so much more comfortable with the ball at his feet than Hugo was. And I think that's going to really help. And I'm just pleased with him as well, because I like the fact that everyone's an expert on Twitter and slagged him off as the cheap option when Rail is available. And all of a sudden they're going to have to eat some humble crumble, especially if he keeps turning up like he did against United. So there we go. Let's move it forward. Score predictions, because I want to talk about transfers next. So hit that like button if you like transfers, and you want to hear us. You want to hear us speculate who we're going to spend the war chest on. Do smash the like button and let us know your score predictions in the chat. Score predictions. Let's go, Jack first.
Going for a 3-0. I do see Spurs kind of having, maybe a lot of the ball, even though Iraola is going to try to, do his own style and everything. I just do see Spurs probably getting around 70% possession. And I just see Richarlison be very hungry. Hopefully he's not too desperate that he's offsides the whole match, but I do see him being very hungry, to try to score. And I see other players that could be brought off the bench that could be very hungry to try to do something as well in case we're ever in trouble, like a Solomon or like a Lo Celso that we brought up before. I think Spurs are coming off of that game with a lot of confidence as well. Like I think anybody would. I know it's away from home and it's not going to be in front of the home crowd, but you are going to leave that Man United game with some confidence. Hopefully we don't start our matches like we always do with these midday kickoffs, which is very slowly and very lackluster. But we have a tendency to do that. But maybe with Ange, just a different type of manager who might know about that sort of thing, probably is anticipating that and can rectify that. So I think Spurs are going to win 3-0.
Second attempt to trigger Jack. The Celso hat trick.
I'm actually looking forward to, just to next level English and just people in general. I've actually one of plenty who said, plenty not nice about Lo Celso during his not so great times at Spurs. I was very much a Lo Celso doubter. I even, kind of backed Tanguy to somehow get the position over Lo Celso when we were first making those predictions at the beginning of preseason. But I'm willing to what I've seen from preseason, what I've heard from Romero, what I've seen, like I said, from his Instagram and everything. I'm willing to give the guy, a chance here because, also mostly because of Ange, like with what Ange has said, simply from this guy is going to stay here and I want him to stay and I'm going to use him. Makes me feel like, all right, I'm willing to give Gio Lo Celso another try. And I have the apology forms waiting caller. I might, do them maybe after 4 or 5 solid outings. Then I'll start to fill out the apology
I think
forms.
we do need to wait 4 or 5 solid outings, to be honest. But
I'm that much of a happy clapper that I can get that ahead of myself. So.
Okay. Cameron?
3-1 us. We'll concede 1 late on, but it'll be a comfortable win. And
wait, there's a problem. There's a problem, Cameron. Steve's going, and he's not seen us win away in decades.
Oh no!
He's being treated to fireworks,
which League Cup
You're
final
the
does he talk about?
problem, Steve. Yeah,
Which League Cup final does he mean? That's the question. Oh, Steve.
3-1 Cam. 3-1.
Yep.
Scorers? Lo Celso, obviously.
Yeah, Lo Celso, Richie, and I'm going to go maybe Sarr again.
Oh, I love Sarr. After he could have been a surprise stand. Never mind. HG, what are you saying?
I am saying that if Spurs win comfortably, like you guys seem to be suggesting, I don't like the fact that we won't be under the radar, right? I want us to stay under the radar. If we win comfortably at Bournemouth, people will start thinking Spurs are onto something, right? And I don't want them to be thinking that until October, really.
Another 3-2 then.
So can we have something that's a bit closer? Like Spurs not to lose. I'll say that, but I could see it being a draw. I don't want it to be a draw, but I also don't mind the idea of us not winning by a truckload. It seems the last thing I want is for us to go to Arsenal in game, 6, and for it to be this massive clash of the Titans stuff, because it's at Arsenal and we'll probably struggle. So can we go for a boring 1-0, a 1-1? We won't see the goals that maybe Ange will want, but I am somewhat negative in this. Like, I'm thinking long term about the season. I want us to do enough, but not to do outrageous. So
3-0, 3-1, and you're saying 1-1?
Yeah, I'll say 1-1, and I'm usually wrong. So let's hope I am again.
I think this is going to be a lot tougher than Cameron and Jack do. I'm kind of in the HG camp on this. We're not the finished article. We played above ourselves, and Man United were terrible, beating Man United comfortably. Let's be real about this. We were above where I thought we would be. So if we can repeat that, great. But I do see we'll have bumps in the road. I'm going to say narrow 2-1 win. Narrow 2-1 win. That's what I believe it will be. I think it will be harder than people think. As Keith says, they were all over Liverpool for 30 minutes. They were. I watched it.
Liverpool have their issues at the moment.
Yeah, you've got to bear in mind, though, that Liverpool have got their issues, but it's still quality side. Man United I think we might be in a little bit of a false position because Man United were not good against us. Yes, we were good, but I do think that HG sort of wasn't as excitable, it's fair to say, as a lot of the other cheese room pundits in our chat group during the game and after the game. And I think it's right not to get too carried away because we're still finding our level. We don't know where everyone's at. And Man United, let's face it, they were shocking against Wolves. They could have got a couple of goals in the first 20 minutes, but they disappeared second half, didn't show any character.
Yeah, I mean, like, Man United were better against us than they were against Wolves. And they beat Wolves. But Wolves should have scored a hatful. Really, they should have done. Like, I'm going to agree with Next Level here. Like, I don't think Man United were terrible. Certainly first half, they weren't terrible. Had they got the first goal, which, again, they probably should have done, then it would have been a completely different game. But it wasn't a different game because Spurs got that crucial first goal. And you felt, because it was early on in the second half, like it felt then, okay, Spurs can ride this wave that they've created to go on and win the game. And like United obviously hit the post pretty quickly after that 1-0. But after that, I don't really remember a great deal.
Yeah,
the chances from free kicks, but they weren't creating things. And in that first half, they were creating chances against us. So, very few teams are the finished article right now. It's all about just making sure you don't lose, nabbing a win if you can, and going through with it. But I feel as if like that United aren't as bad as everyone's saying, but we are closer to where both teams want to be. Right, like had that United game finished 1-1 or 2-2, I don't think many could have complained. But they didn't take their chances, and we did. And I mean, every football game comes down to that, really.
I want to talk about one thing two things actually before we go to transfers. Will Richie come good? Is my little note that I've written down because it's a debate that continues to rage on Twitter. Lots of people writing him off. Lots of people in our little chat group of cheeseheads writing him off. You'd know, Jack, if you unsnoozed the group. Don't unsnooze the group, honestly. You'll miss nothing. But I do think that people are writing Richie off a bit early. I'll put myself out there because guess what? I'll put myself out there and let you guys chat it through. But for me, Richie held the ball up really well, actually, Man United. I thought second half he was doing a really good job. And I thought when Son went central, we lost a bit up top and the ball was coming back a lot more. I thought he held the ball up well and he was flicking it out left and right well. Again, I know we talk about the Miss Fernandez chance against Man United. It didn't quite fall for him when we hit the bar and hit the post. But on another day, that ball's like a yard that way.
So caller, is he going to come good?
I'm getting to that. All right. I let you meander down some alleyways. At least allow me. So I think, I do believe in Richie. I do believe in Richie. I think that he's not going to be anything like Harry Kane. No one can be, for the record. I don't think we need a striker per se to score loads of goals, because I think you're going to get loads of goals from midfield and fullbacks. So I suppose I should have rephrased my question, really. Do we need to replace Kane's goals? Was the chat in the group. And can Richie do it? I think that he will score 15 goals this season. That's what I reckon, which, if you want to term that as coming good, I think he's going to be a good forward for us this season. I still think we need to sign a good striker, which we'll come on to in a minute. But for me, I think he will come good. And I'll pass it to who would like to go first?
Go, Jack.
Go, Jack.
I've done some runs around Prospect Park with the Richarlison shirt on, and almost like good omens or faith, that he will come good. I really like Richie for the person that he is. I like him for his politics. I like him, for where, his come up story. Just like him for the person that he is. But I have to sometimes distinguish that from, his actual footballing ability. And I am often left, kind of confused, where I do back him heavily. But in certain games, you see like the best version of himself, where you see him holding up the ball really well. You see an incredible finish. You see outside the foot passes and, him skilling past his man, no problem. And then other games, he, the ball's hit into him and he has a 20-yard first touch and, things like that. He is a bit of a conundrum, I think, at times. And I just think what it comes down to is really for him, it's just confidence. I think he is a player that relies a lot on it. And there are players that at the end of the day are that way. They're not perfect. Not every player can play at, the most consistent level. And that's probably what separates the 30 goal a season type players versus the 15, 16 a goal season type players, is that the 15, 16 a goal season type players rely on streaks, and they rely on these moments where they're feeling top of the world and they're, doing everything perfectly. And then there are times when they're not. And I think Richie seems to fall in that category. I feel like that could actually work out for Spurs as long as he's doing what he needs to be doing, which is just burying sort of the easy chances that are put in front of him. I think that moment that he had against Brentford, if you recall, we could have won that game if he actually did finish a couple of those chances that he did end up being presented. He didn't even have that great of a game, but he did end up having two chances where if he had a better touch or a better finish, he would have, had, people wouldn't be all that worried because he just ended up finishing, the dinner that was presented to him. But I think that's the issue with Richie, is that even if he has a bad game, when he has had his chances, he also hasn't buried them. We've seen Kane have some pretty anonymous games, in the past, but then he ends up scoring a header in the 85th minute, and then no one really cares and no one really remembers it anymore. And I think that's what Richie sort of needs. And the problem is that he's not doing that for us right now. And I'm going to keep the faith, but for the most part, I feel like it's hard to know what he's really doing wrong, because I've seen him play at his best, and when he's playing at his best, I don't really have any, criticisms. He looks like an excellent striker, but when he's playing at his worst, I have 1,000 criticisms. So I just don't really know, it's hard to know what to tell him what to do, because you get such bipolar versions of Richie, it feels like, all the time. And that's where I kind of don't know what to say. I can't say that he has a bad first touch, because there are games when he has an excellent first touch and, he has an excellent, a vision and everything. And so I'm just confused with Richie. I'm going to keep backing him because at the end of the day, it seems like Ange is, as well as Spurs, because we haven't been pushing for the striker as much as we thought we would. And it looks like Ange is keeping the faith as well in him. So I'm going to keep the faith in Richie if Ange is. But that's what I would say, is he is a confusing one. He is a conundrum, I think. Charles.
Yeah, I actually agree with everything you're saying there, Jack. I believe in Richie. I mean, last season he was playing in the left, he was playing in the right. Kane Essential was central. So Richie hasn't had too much time to play in that central role. And I think, what are we now? 2 games in, coming into our third. This is only 2 games in. We need to give the guy time to settle into that role. Harry's gone. So it's his time. It's his opportunity. Does it help that he may need competition of another striker there to keep him motivated? Potentially. And that's an important thing psychologically for players, to have that tension of competition there. But I do believe in him. He's got the talent there. I think he puts a lot of pressure on himself. But I do believe in Richie getting his goals. He will get the supply. Let's no question. He's an Ange system player. So I do believe in him. I think we've probably not got to ask this question just after 2 games in. You probably need to ask it 6 to 10 games in, where there's probably a greater sample size per se. Because let's face it, we're not reliant on just a Harry Kane anymore. We're reliant on multiple score sources in that Ange system. And we would hope that Richie will get a lick of the ice cream of that as well, by virtue of tap in, cross, what have you. So I do believe Richie will come good, but it just needs a little bit of time. I think just after 2 games, you can't be conclusive on that.
Can we define here what come good means? Like, what does come good mean for someone like Richarlison?
I think it is a certain amount of goals, in the Premier League. I think I agree with if Collar meant 15 goals in the Premier League, I would say he grabs 15 in the Premier League. There's no conversations anymore about, whether he's, able to do it, because then if he was able to do that the following season, then there would really be no problems. I think, of course, maybe we could ask for a bit better, but you're not that concerned. So I think 15 goals is a decent number, actually, to be honest. Because when you think about it, everybody, when Gabriel Jesus was first brought in, remember every Arsenal fan was like saying he was going to score 25 goals or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, let's hold our horses a little bit. Like, I think, 15 or 16 is pretty, impressive enough for most players. So I would say 15.
Yeah, and no one expects him to be the Kane as well, score the same amount. So, yeah.
Because to me, this is the thing. I think the definition really of what equals come good is the most important thing. I don't care if Richie doesn't score a single goal this season if Spurs win their games, right? Because it's a team game, right? And if Richie has played a part in those wins, which you would expect him to, like, we're not going to win many games with just 10 players. So if Richie is playing and we win games, he will have played a part. Do I think he will come good in the way that maybe we would like someone who costs that much money to do so? No. And as much as Ange's football might get him close to goal, no, is the short answer for me. I didn't really want us to sign him. I liked the idea of a player like that, but I didn't feel it was a great move anyway. But if I look at some of the comments, and I've starred a few as we were talking about this, right? This idea, so Keith talks about how he's flat-footed for chances in the box and he's not a goal poacher. Completely agree on that. It's a different type of striker that will make those simple moves. And it's simple. It's very difficult to find a striker who can do this, but one that can get away from a defender and be in a space where the ball ends up. We saw in the Man United game a couple of half chances and they came off the post and it didn't come to him. There are some strikers that just have a knack for being in the right place, and I'm not sure Richie has it. I also agree with this. He's a confidence player. Like, if he scores one, like I know you talked to Cam about having these players who need to have a striker behind them pushing them. I don't feel like Richie needs that. I feel like Richie needs a run of games and a run of goals. And then you'll see a confident Richie, and maybe those half chances will fall to him. There won't be any logic to it, just that somehow it's now falling for him. I agree with this comment. Yeah, we will judge them on their goals. Like, I want Spurs to win, but of course, a striker's job is to put it in the net. And if he gets 10, people will think we can do better. And to me, I think we could do better than Richarlison in that system. We've got the comment here from Roy. Completely agree. Right? Like, there are types of strikers. He's not a finisher, I would say. Richie is not a natural finisher. He's a striker. Like, if you play defensive football like Conte, he will struggle because he can't really hold the ball up and make runs. If you play an attacking system like Ange, he will struggle because he likes to have those channels to run into. So it feels like it sounds awful, in a mid-table side, he will be effective, right? That sounds harsh probably, but you get that impression with Richie. Like, Brazil weren't at their best. They were not a great team in the World Cup, but he's a decent part of that side because they don't play with a high press and they don't play counter-attacking football. They want to play with the whole pitch, let's say. So I don't know with Richie. Like, I don't think he will come good in that sense, But I do believe he will get given chances, and it may well be 4, 6, 8 weeks until we see this Argentinian kid really involved in the first team. But so he will get his chances. But those chances he took he had at Brentford that he didn't take, they're the types of chances he's going to get. He needs to be able to find the bottom corner with either foot, keep the ball low, make it difficult for the keeper. He hasn't done that yet for Spurs, and I feel like that's the type of finisher that will really thrive in this system.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in all of that. Time will tell. I think the one thing we can probably all agree on is he needs a run of games to see whether he's got it or not. And he's going to get that by the look of it. So let's on that note, let's talk some transfers. So I've seen some good rumours this week. You tell me if you're keen on them. Fatty from I've been called that a few times, from Barcelona. Does he fit the bill, Jack, European football expert?
I don't want to sound cliche with this sort of statement, but he does seem like a player that was so 2 years ago sort of kind of guy, because he hasn't, to my knowledge, really done a whole lot. Like since he sort of first blew up on the scene, I think he's picked up some pretty big injuries that have held him out, like I think at one stage for a whole year or something like that. And then even since that injury, from what I've heard from the Barcelona drama show that always comes out, is that Xavi and him haven't been on the best of terms, and he's not getting as much play time as he wants to, and he hasn't even produced the numbers that he's supposed to be, or at least, according to a player that has a £1 billion release clause that he was given by the club. So I don't know. Like, I might say he's a guy that hasn't done a lot for how talented he originally looked, a couple of seasons ago. I'm a little worried that maybe big injuries and things or something has gotten in his way. It could be that he just needs a move away and then he'll come back to his best. But I would say he was hot for a little bit, and now he's looking like a third, fourth choice sort of player for Barcelona. I'm actually, weirdly enough, more interested in the kid that was cooking Region. I thought, on the right wing, that Yassine Yamal or whatever his name was kind of guy, because he's like 16 and has been actually carrying them through some of their most recent games. Even they brought him off the bench ahead of a guy like Ansu Fati, and has been, contributing goals and assists for them when they've needed it to get through some games. So if anything, I would look at that 16-year-old. He looks to be a real player. That's my answer.
I'm going to give Cameron and HG this one, and Jack, you can chip in if you want. But Brendan Johnson from Forest, I don't get this, to be perfectly honest. But I suppose there's two questions there. Number one, would you be happy if we, shot a massive 40 million on him, or 50 million, or whatever it is that's being quoted in the press? And does the fact that we're linked with Fatty and Johnson and several other wide players, does that suggest that a winger is more important to us than a striker? HG, and then I'll come to you, Cameron.
I feel like Brennan Johnson is Richarlison. It costs a lot of money, but it doesn't really fit what we want in my eyes, right? Like we need another right-sided player. Brennan Johnson is a right-sided player. Off you go. We needed another striker to help Kane out. Richarlison, another striker. Off you go. No, I didn't want Richarlison, and I don't want Brennan Johnson. It's not to say that Brennan Johnson is a terrible player. He's not. I just think he's not the type of winger that Ange wants. I'm not quite sure where his pace will be that useful. I mean, do you know what I mean? If we're playing high up the pitch, is he great over 5 yards? Because that's kind of the balls around the corner that we're going to need. And I don't see that about Brennan Johnson. I don't see him as being that type of winger. So for me, no thanks, frankly.
Cameron, your thoughts?
Yeah, same here. I've watched a little bit, not too much of Johnson, I think at Forest. But from what I'm reading, I don't think he'd work the system. But I think it's just way too expensive. I think if we're going to be data-led in our recruitment, but shelling out 40 to 50 mil on this, no, it's a no for me.
Yeah, I suppose the second part of my question is it more likely we're going to sign a winger than a forward, a striker?
I think I don't think. I mean, it's weird because I feel like we're okay for wingers, right?
Yeah.
If you think about Perisic and Bryan Hill and Kulusevski, and I mean Kulusevski's not really a winger in the Ange sense, but Solomon, I don't feel like it's a massive need, right?
Yeah.
Centre back is where the money should be going, right
Yeah.
now. If players leave and if Bryan Hill goes and he may well go, then okay. But again, at any point would I be thinking Brennan Johnson is the answer? Not for the way that Spurs want to play. I just don't see it.
It is indeed a strange one. Well, a couple of forwards we've been linked with. I'll give you the the Lukaku one first. That Levy has said there's no way we're signing him on permanent deal, but a loan may be a possibility. Maybe if we get desperate, I guess. Does any of you chaps just nod or shake your head if you want Lukaku on loan?
I think someone put it perfectly recently. It wasn't me. I think it was someone on Talk Sport said Lukaku is not being rejected for his ability. He's being rejected right now for, the antics that he's caused for being who he is. No one is rejecting him based off what he can do as a striker. I think everybody sort of rates him still to this day kind of as a striker, but it's just all the drama that he's caused. Chelsea, Inter Milan, Chelsea twice, technically. He's, because he was there another time, before he was bought back.
Well, as a youth prospect, really.
Yeah, well, he still, I think, caused some sort of scuffle and kind of, in a way, I think he did cause some drama.
In the same way Lo Celso caused drama at Spurs?
I think he's had some sort of drama always follow him. It feels like, Lukaku, especially when it comes to his future, it always seems to be the case. It's always up in the air. He's, claimed love and loyalty to one club. Then the next minute, he's leaving off to another. And I think that's probably the reason why nobody's going after him. So
could be an Adebayor-esque signing, HG.
Oh, gee.
Like, Romero, he's the type. He seems to me that he wants to be loved and he wants to be the main man, but when he doesn't get what he wants, he goes off the deep end. And he may not rant and rave like Antonio Conte did, but there is this kind of like, well, if you're not going to love me, I find someone that will, right? And I've seen in the comments that it looks like he's going to Roma, Mourinho, Lukaku again. I mean, I'm pretty certain Mourinho probably bought him the first time around. At least one of the times for Chelsea. Maybe not. They've both been at Chelsea so much, who knows? But, do I want him? No. Do I feel that he would be a decent signing on loan? Yes. I don't hate the idea.
No,
but again, we're talking about, if we're talking about loan players, we are talking about people to build up the squad, to bolster the squad. They're not going to be there permanently. We don't see them being permanently, but Lukaku counts as homegrown, which will help, right? And so I just, I don't hate, again, he's not my first choice. He's probably not in my top 5 choices, if I'm honest. But if we are thinking we need something a bit different, then I'd be okay with it. It's just, I don't know. He's not too... No, I'm okay. That's as far as I can go. I'm okay with the idea of it.
I mean, through his career, he averages a goal every other game.
His record is really good.
It's really good. Yeah.
good.
In one of the chat groups I'm in WhatsApp, I mentioned how good his record is because he's only about a month or two older than Kane.
Yeah.
But their records aren't that different. No. Lukaku has scored goals pretty much everywhere he's been, apart from Chelsea, and he's never really played that much for them.
No, 8 goals in 26 games for Chelsea.
Yeah, but the first time he was there, he didn't play much, and the second time he did. But I never got the impression he was the main man.
He had 10 appearances in his first spell with Chelsea. Nothing, literally nothing. I mean, that's a Bryan Hill record.
Yeah, but he was 17 at the time. He scored goals at West Brom. He scored goals at Everton. Yeah. He scored goals at Man United. But again, he wasn't the striker they wanted. Right? Yeah. Man United were looking for a Van Nistelrooy. They were looking for a Van Persie. They were looking for someone that would score them 30 goals a season guaranteed. And Lukaku needs 150 chances maybe to do that, whereas the others didn't. And the team wasn't as good. But again, Lukaku has just never he's never made that relationship with the fans. At Inter Milan, they liked him a lot because he was part of the strike duo that won them the league.
72 appearances, 47 goals.
It's a great record.
Good.
It is a great record, but Jack's right. Why is he not wanted by other teams? Because strikers with record like that get moves quite easily. You'd think. Is it the wages?
It's almost like Icardi. I think he's become a bit of an Icardi. I think he's just going to have to go to a Galatasaray or something like that.
Even when he was on loan at Milan last season, another 10 goals in 25 games. He's a goal scorer. He'll score goals wherever. We've all just been talking about we're crying out for a goal scorer if Richarlison can't do it. If he's available on loan, to me, it's a no-brainer if the price.
Yeah, but you actually add him to the squad where Ange is in this very critical phase of creating chemistry very early on, and then do you?
But I trust Cameron.
I
know exactly what you're going to say because it's something I've wrestled with. Would he disrupt the team spirit, the harmony, the chemistry? But I think Ange is a better manager than that. I think Ange knows what to say to him. I think Ange would get the best.
It's an open question, yeah.
And it's a loan. At the end of the day, we're talking about a hypothetical loan. So, for me, I don't think it would be the end of the world to get Lukaku. I think it's not a bad option. I don't think it will happen, by the way. But let's tie that into the next one. And I was going to go and talk about what's his name, Orban, but I think we've spoken enough about him. I think everyone knows his goal record at Ghent and the fact that he looks like he could be special. But then we thought Vincent Janssen, when we signed him from that league, would be a bit special. So I think we do have to take true. We all have to take it with a little bit of pinch of salt. But I'm not going to go to Orban because we've spoken about him loads. We're going to talk about Ivan Toney because I've just seen a couple of comments. I'd go for Ivan Toney and get him on the cheap whilst he's banned. What do you think the chances are of Brentford releasing Ivan Toney on the cheap, Jack?
I don't think they're going to release him on the cheap. I think there are plenty of clubs that will take him. I was definitely alarmed by his most recent podcast interview.
Liverpool and Arsenal.
We spoke last season about how a lot of the players within our squad lacked accountability. I think Ivan Toney sort of screamed that in that sort of interview that he most recently had was a lack of accountability for anything that he took part in. I was maybe for the player.
See, I thought Jack, you were referring to the fact that he loves Arsenal and is a Liverpool fan.
Is that what he said in the interview?
He loves the way Arsenal play football. He can see himself playing for Arsenal, and he's a Liverpool fan and always loves Liverpool. So that to me screams red flag. Definitely big red. But I think his Diary of a CEO podcast was also a bit of a red flag, I think, for me. Yeah. But I also put to you that he would not be released on the cheap and Brentford would demand around £100 million.
No, whoever's willing to take that risk, I think, on him personally, because I think he's shown some character flaws, but who's ever willing to take a risk on that is going to pay the money for him.
But we're not going to pay £100 million.
No, and Man United will.
Yeah.
Right, I don't think Liverpool need a striker. Arsenal might if it does. Nketiah is scoring a few goals. Gabriel Jesus is scoring goals, but Arsenal have shown that they're not willing. That they're not afraid of signing these bigger players. Brentford will make a pack of money when they sell him, and Ivan Toney will have probably a choice of clubs to go to. It's all about what Ivan Toney wants.
How long?
A couple of years, I think. I think it's 2020. When did he sign? He signed a 5-year deal, so 25. I think he'll have a year left at the end of this season. But Brentford will cash in. Toney will have options to play at a higher level, to play European football. Toney will go somewhere. But I didn't think Maddison would join Spurs. I don't think Toney will join Spurs. But just because I was wrong with Maddison, I'll stick with it. I think Toney, as good as Spurs might be this season, we would have to have a very good season for him to be like, okay, let Spurs play the type of football I want to play. He'd be a very good fit for Spurs. I just don't think he would really entertain it.
Agreed. Right, let's talk about Pepe quickly. Porto, £51 million sterling. GDP? No.
GDP.
Oh
Got
my
GDP.
God. GBP.
GBP. Bid submitted, apparently rejected by Porto. This is a player, again, a winger, but he can play in multiple positions. Seems like a very Tottenham signing, but 51 million doesn't seem like a very Tottenham number. Jack, HG, know much about this guy?
Not a big fan of this one, to be honest. He's my age, from what I could tell, and I feel like he's never really earned a move, away from the Primera Liga yet, which to me at least is some sort of alarm if you're 26 and you haven't gotten a move away from there yet. And to my knowledge, he hasn't really had like a huge season of any kind, to really suggest that he would get that big move away. And also recently, at least, the Primera Liga is really, I would say, rinsing Premier League clubs, with some of the transfer fees that they've been quoting, recently. While they have been producing very, very good players, I think the Primera Liga, at the same time, for a 26-year-old, 50 million, whatever it is that you quoted there, seems like far too much. If he was 18, maybe, but for a 26-year-old, I'm not so sure. And he hasn't ever really had big numbers before, and that's where I'm also a bit worried. Like Carlos Vinicius had far more goals and assists in the time that he was, and obviously different positions, but still, just considering. And I am a little worried just because the Premier Liga is quoting some big prices. They're making everybody pay at least 50 million, it seems like, for anything.
Vinny's an option, yeah. Get Vinny back in. HG, fan of this one?
No, never heard of him. I just Googled him.
Neither.
Literally never heard of him. So yeah, he may be the next best thing, but no. If what Jack says, if he's that old, no. It feels like, again, this is what newspapers will do, right? They'll look and see what Spurs might need. They'll look and see the players that Ange might want, and they'll just link them because it's easy copy. I don't think there's anything in it. I don't think Spurs would have put in a bid for someone like that and have it come out of nowhere. Right, like there are enough people who have some connection with Spurs that it might have come out before then, but no, don't see it.
I mean, my final thought on all of this would be, why are we looking at wingers when we've got Messi coming back from injury? Because clearly he could play a role. £40 million he was worth, apparently, according to Dave O.
I think that Bryan Hill is a weird one because, again, we all think that he will fit Ange's system, right? But he's out injured, and we almost certainly won't sell him while he's injured.
2 weeks away from fitness, HG is back in training.
Yeah, but the window, unless he's going to Saudi Arabia, the window closes in a week. No. So, you'd like to think he would get an opportunity. You would like to think that, again, it's strange because, Perisic fits what Ange wants to do. So what are you going to do if Son's playing left wing and you want to bring on another left winger? Because we've subbed Son in both games, I think, so far. So are you going to give those minutes to Perisic, who is, perhaps, certainly more proven at football, or do you give it to Bryan Hill, who may not really want to be at Spurs long term if he hasn't settled in London? He's not really. I mean, he's spent in his 2 seasons at Spurs. He spent half a season not playing and half a season playing a lot back in Spain. So you'd think that maybe going back to Spain would be something that he's interested in. But wingers, as much as I might think, I'd like a new one, Solomon has shown enough for me to think that he could play either side. He could play down the right and he's comfortable. I don't really think it's a massive need. I know we're talking about attacking players, and strikers especially, but I just feel that Spurs, at this time next season, Spurs will sell Richarlison to someone. And the question now is, do we buy someone now with whatever money we might get coming in? Or do we wait? And I suspect that waiting will be worse for us. So it would be.
So that's the option we will take.
Yeah, because the money whatever money we get for selling someone will go on a centre back, right? I mean, it will and it should. But I think that since I don't feel that Richie will really be the success we want, getting someone in like Orban or someone in now would benefit us further in the long run.
And on that bombshell, we've been going in for an hour and 40 minutes, hour and 44 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you've hit the subscribe button and the like button. Please do join us. We'll be back on Monday. We've got big plans next week. So we've got transfer deadline day looming. But we'll be back Monday with the review of the weekend's football. And then obviously Wednesday we'll be talking football. And on Friday we'll be talking football. And we hope you'll be back to see us then. And transfers, hopefully. It's a big week for Spurs. Lots of ins and outs, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we play Tuesday night. Shout out to Davo, who forgot that Spurs are playing on Tuesday night. Well done, Davo. Tried to organise a cheese room meeting for 9 o'clock Tuesday night, and I was like, guys, I'm watching Fulham. Yeah, he's that confident, exactly.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of things going on. The 3 shows, Spurs play Tuesday night, Friday is deadline day. We'll have nothing to speak about after that. We'll be back to Spurs playing once a week for the next 3 months.
Keep it right here with the Cheese Room podcast. And check out the audio pod as well. Full match reviews available from all good podcast providers. Jack, thanks for joining us from Brooklyn.
Thank you for having me. I stayed well behaved, was a good boy when it came to the Lloris temptations.
You didn't dive in.
Spent instead 10 minutes talking about whether Emerson Royale can play as a right back. So I think I, spent better time served, on that, more productive.
It's always great to have you on, mate. Cameron, mate, it's been a good one.
Yeah, it's been good in the land of Ange here. Ange is becoming a cult figure down here. So just keep that momentum flowing and keep those Spurs fans chanting his name for what we're seeing down here. So it's been good.
And das is good to have you on the show. HG. Thank you for joining all the way from Vienna. We are a truly international podcast.
No problem. I enjoyed it. Two things quickly. Is the Fulham match on TV? I don't think so. Certainly not in England. It might be for Cameron, and it might be for me, and it might be for Jack. Yeah. But it probably isn't for Caller. And Caller's got his ways, obviously. And the guy who keeps on asking about Santiago Jimenez at Feyenoord, he's a good player, but they have Champions League. He's not going anywhere this season. I mean, I've said that about a few of their players, and some of them have left. But I don't think that for him, he'll want to be shown on a world stage, which the Champions League is. And so I don't see that one happening either. But it was great to be on. I've been on holiday all week. To come back and talk Spurs has been brilliant.
The highlight of your holiday.
Absolutely. Better than watching the Athletics in Budapest. As fun as that was, talking Spurs will always be number one for me.
All right, great stuff. And see you next time, Cheeseheads. And in the meantime, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you
Big
Spurs.
Ange.